First, I would like to congratulate you for being selected to this program. This is very competitive. We had over 400 expressions of interest, and you are among 104 have been selected. So you did a very good job showing very strong interest and commitment to the cause. That's why you are selected. And we also see a strong potential and capability of applying your knowledge to your real life situations through this course. So thank you. With no further ado, I would like to introduce our special guest today before starting the lecture. Today, we are honored to have Professor Frank Yotso, Director of the Grand Challenge Program on Zero Carbon Energy for Asia Pacific here at the ANU, and also head of the Energy Institute of Climate Energy and Disaster Solutions. We are honored to have Ms. Sherpa Yevenpa, Director of the Southeast Asia Energy Transition Partnership, or ETP, and also our partner, including Ms. Tarek from MPES and other local partners from Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam. And very fortunately, today we have the presence of His Excellencies, Mr. Dr. Tak Ding Thi, the Vice Chair of Science, Technology, and Environment of Vietnam National Assembly. And that's equivalent to Deputy Minister level in Vietnamese government, for those who are not familiar with Vietnamese government. So thank you very much, all our special guests today. And now I would like to invite Professor Frank Yotso to deliver welcome remarks. So over to you, Professor Frank.
Yes, welcome. Welcome to the Southeast Asia Energy Transition Partnership, and in particular, the roundtables of the partnership. So what is this? It's a 2-year capacity building and also networking program in Indonesia, the Philippines, and in Vietnam, in a regional partnership delivered in substantive measure from here in Australia. So what we're kicking off today is a 20-week structured online training program comprising a number of professional forums and training sessions related to our region's energy transition. As my colleague Dr. Tang Do mentioned, we have around 100 participants enrolled. This is the group here today. You come from government agencies, from industry, from civil society in Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, and you have, of course, been selected from over 400 who have expressed an interest to take part. And the goal here is for us to help provide you with the latest understanding and also analytical tools to accelerate the energy transition to low emission systems, reliable energy supply systems, both in policy and in markets, and also, of course, in the process to help build professional networks within your countries and across boundaries. So yes, my name is Frank Yotso. I'm a professor here at the Australian National University, at the university's Public Policy School, and also I'm the head of energy at the university's Institute for Climate Energy and Disaster Solutions. This partnership and the roundtable component of the partnership is delivered by a consortium comprising the ANU and the Australian Mekong Partnership for Environmental Resources and Energy Systems, or AMPERS for short. Today we start the executive training component of this program with a session on Australia's experience with the energy transition in the global context. And as you will hear from my colleague, Professor Ken Baldwin, there are some very big changes underway in Australia's energy system, Australia's industrial system as well. And there are very important inferences that we can draw for many other countries as well. And over the coming weeks and months, you will be able to hear from and in fact discuss with a number of expert researchers who work at the cutting edge of energy research here at the Australian National University. We certainly look forward very much to the opportunity to engage with you and We hope for very lively exchange in this group. So please do take the opportunity to ask questions, share your experience and perspectives, both by way of speaking in the group, and also please do use the chat that is available here on the Zoom function. I'll close with a thank you, of course, to our project partners, including Ms. Sirpa Javanpar, who you will hear from in just a minute. She's the director of the Southeast Asia Energy Transition Partnership. And also, of course, a very warm thank you to our partners at Ampères, and importantly, the partner organizations in each of the 3 partner countries. First, though, and very importantly, I have the pleasure to invite Mr. Ta Dinh Thi to take the floor. He is a member of Vietnam's National Assembly, and as you've heard, the vice chair of the Science, Technology and Environment Committee. Mr. Thi, over to you.
Thank you very much, Professor Phanh Jojo. Dear Professor Phanh Jojo, Professor Ken Ban Uyên, Dr. Đỗ Nam Thắng from Australian National University, Mr. Sirpa Javanpar, Director of Southeast Asia Energy Transition Partnership, colleagues and the course participants from Indonesia, the Philippines and Vietnam, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to teach the Southeast Asia Energy Transition Partnership Executive Training course. Energy transition towards a low and zero carbon society has started in many parts of the world, including our region and our countries. It is an essential process to help us address many common issues such as climate change, energy shortage, and local pollution. Importantly, the transition towards clean and affordable energy system will enable us to achieve sustainable development goals. The post-pandemic recovery period is a great opportunity to accelerate this process. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that this training course will provide you with rich information and knowledge about the energy transition. The course program looks very impressive to me. It is a comprehensive with update today's energy important topics. The Australian National University has a world-class expertise in energy and in the Asia Pacific region. It has a great number of dedicated and capable staff with strong track record in the delivery of knowledge and technology on renewable energy and the energy transition. I have met many ANU alumni who are capable of applying the acquired knowledge and skill to address streamline issues. I believe that you will be among them soon. I hope that through this course, you will also have to be able to expand and strengthen your network in energy and climate change. Getting to know the renowned experts from the ANU and learning from them and from other peer course participants are great opportunity for you to further your professional network. I also see this course as a good opportunity to strengthen our regional efforts, in particular in Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines, in energy transition and addressing climate change. Our country, Vietnam, is going forward to implement our goal towards zero net carbon emission by 2050. I would like to thank ANU for this opportunity to see you today. I wish you own the best and support every success. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ta Ding Thi, for a very warm welcome and speeches. Thank you very much again. Now I'd like to invite Ms. Sopa Yapenpa, Director of Southeast Asia Energy Transition Partnership, to deliver her remarks. So over to you, Sopa.
Good morning and thank you. Thank you, Tando, and good morning to all of you. I'd like to particularly thank the Australian University and all of you for coming into today's Energy Transition Roundtable session on renewable energy and the case of Australia. I'm particularly delighted to participate in the deep dive on the Australian experience, and I'm thankful for the words of His Excellency Mr. Tan Dinh Thi, Member of the Parliament and Vice Chairman of the Science, Technology and Environmental Committee of the Vietnam National Assembly, and particularly for his remarks on how the region has been always able to learn from the Australian experience and now today regarding climate and energy progress in terms of the energy transition. As many of you know, the Southeast Asian Energy Transition Partnership is a multi-donor partnership with governments of Germany, France, UK, and Canada, and private sector philanthropies, such as Children's Investment Fund Foundation, IKEA Foundation, Sequoia Climate Fund, and many others. This partnership has been established to support and strengthen the region's countries in their resolve to champion, implement, and coordinate energy transition in alignment with those national targets that Mr. Tan Dinh Thi mentioned earlier. So alignment with these targets will require also our attention to achieve a stronger and sustainable transition that is also equitable and fair to all the stakeholders. As ETP is a partnership itself, first and foremost, we also seek partnerships in all of our work. And we are also aware that energy transition requires alliances and all of our efforts, including yours, dear participants. In funding this Energy Transition Roundtable, ETP is implementing it in partnership with the CASE, which is the Clean, Affordable, Secure Energy Technical Assistance Program of the German government, and the Australian National University and peers. This enables us to deep dive into energy transition issues in Southeast Asia. And gaining exposure to the global practices, concepts, and tools for accelerating energy transition is critical for capturing the opportunities, but also for mitigating the possible mistakes that can or may occur in this journey. In the region, we have seen enhanced ambitions harnessed in the net zero carbon emission targets. The region's countries have also joined the Glasgow Pact, which points to the importance of the coal phase down in energy transition processes. This is obviously a significant undertaking, as energy transition is the biggest change project since industrialization. It will change the way our economies work and also bring significant benefits in terms of jobs, economic diversification, and the environmental benefits that will lead to new opportunities. The hard part is ahead of us, though, to develop and implement a clear plan to achieve that net zero emission target envisioned in the declarations. We have a lot of work to do, and knowledge underlines our collective capacity to accelerate energy transition, to align policies with these climate commitments, to de-risk the investment environment for viable, bankable energy efficiency and renewable energy investments, and to enhance flexibility of the electricity grid networks and expand smart grids, and underpin the progress with growing knowledge and growing awareness of the energy transition and its benefits. Today, we have an opportunity to learn the lessons from the world's most rapid expansion in deployment of renewable energy in the energy supply. Australia is on its way to realize the benefits of energy transition. So let me now warmly welcome all of you to take full advantage of this wonderful learning journey through the Energy Transition Roundtables, and pass the floor back to Dr. Tan Do and Professor Ken Baldwin for our session today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sopa. Very encouraging messages to all of us, especially to the course participants. So thank you very much. And now let me start sharing my screen and introduce you to the course. So again, I am Thando. I am the course convener of this very exciting program. Give me 1 minute. The computer usually takes me some seconds to start warming up and move to the next slide. Here we go. So, as you have access to the course Moodle site, and I assume that you have a look at the course outline. This is the agenda of our whole course over the next 24 weeks. The course will have 10 sessions. So today is the first session in which we're going to learn about the Australian transition, experience in the transition, and also global context, delivered by Professor Ken Bowen after the introduction session. And next week, we're going to learn from the renewable energy generation from Professor Andrew Blakers. After that, every 2 weeks, we will have the lecture at the same time. And the lectures will covering the topics of carbon pricing, international renewable energy systems, energy storage, and operation electricity grids. The topics also cover more policy oriented topics such as the energy efficiency, trade, investment, green industrial policy, industrial workforce planning and transition, and social transition. So the program will cover not only the technical part of the energy transition, but also the social, economic, and policy aspects. One note here is that this session will be followed by the next session next week. And after that, we will have every 2 weeks. And from April, the time zone will be changing. So I highlight in orange color here. From those, so from section 4, International Renewable Energy System in April, the timing will be changed. And I will talk more about that in the next slide. The last course will be on the 29th of June, in which we will recap all the contents and close the training. After that, in the first 2 weeks of July, you will have opportunity to reflect what you have learned from the course through a short essay or report, in which you will address 2 questions. What are the most interesting components you have learned from the course? And what is your plan to apply the acquired knowledge during the course to your work? Then we will provide feedback on your essays and reports and issue the certificate of participations. So one important note here is that from April, the time zone will change. So the session times will be from 10 to 12 if you are in Bangkok, Jakarta, or Hanoi, and from 11 to 1 p.m. if you are in Manila. And some of you may be in different time zones, so you will need to check your time zone accordingly for your according session time. So please be careful and plan accordingly. During the course, we would encourage you to study the learning materials before the lectures. We will upload the pre-reading on the course Moodle site and available in English as well as in Bahasa and Vietnamese. We encourage you to attend the lectures regularly because all the lectures will contain important and interesting information. Participate in the lecture activities, including asking questions to the chat box and also sharing the information, sharing your experience. And particularly the course have the forum on the website in which you can put your questions or share your experience. And our course facilitators will make sure that all the questions will be addressed and also lead to wider discussions. And from that, we also build the network. We encourage you to interact with the lecturers and other course participants, and especially think about how to apply what you're learning to your work. So if you could do these activities regularly and actively, I'm sure that you will make most out of the course. After the course, we will issue the certificate of participants to those who completed at least 80% attendance. We will check your attendance regularly to see and we would love to see your active 100% if possible attendance. Another condition is, as I mentioned earlier, your final essay or report of 800 to 1,000 words reflecting about the course and your learning. We also do the course evaluation at the end of the course and also interviews with some of you. So we will have a kind of information library for those who have not had opportunities like you to attend the course and make them as valuable as possible. And the next step, important one, is please stay tuned for the coming policy deep dives and other activities of the course. After this executive training course, we plan to have a series of other deep dive policy dialogues, and we will welcome you to attend. And also, one of the key selection criteria we will consider is your active participation during the course. So please stay active during the course, and that might lead to other opportunities. For example, attending the future activities by the ETP as well as ANU, MPES, and our partners. And possibly we will be able to invite you to have a field visit in Australia, visiting ANU campus sometime in the future, either in this program or in other programs that we are developing. So that's a future plan. And staying active, engaged in the course would be key determinant for your continuing participating in our future activities. Now I'd like to pause here and see whether you have any quick feedbacks. And I'd like to check whether Professor Ken Bowen is here. Not yet. Ken, whether you are here, please.
Hi, Tung. Yes, I'm here, ready to go.
Oh, great. Thanks. Thanks, Ken. Now, this is the last slide of my presentation. If you have any questions, the first contacts would be Ms. Tien Lê, if you are from Vietnam, Mr. Ivan, if you are from the Philippines, and Ms. Nisa, if you are from Indonesia. So please contact the team here if you have any questions. They will be the first focal points to address your questions and any issue, any concerns you may have. And we have, of course, a team to support you and support the cause. So I think that that's for now, and I'm sure that you may have questions, but we can hold that until later. We have more opportunities, and now I would like to invite Professor Ken to deliver the first session, very interesting session. So Professor Ken, please, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tung, and it's a pleasure to meet you all this afternoon. It is, as Tung indicates, the starting presentation in the series, and it's important, I think, as we enter the energy transition in our respective countries, to understand the lessons from the rest of the world in the global context, and particularly to also see what is happening in Australia, where we are experiencing the very rapid conversion of our energy systems to renewable energy as we speak. So that's why this session is called the Australian Experience in the Global Context. So I'd like to take you through that. Just to let you know, we will be pausing every now and then for questions. So if you have a question, then please use either the chat or the raise hand indicator in your bottom control panel, and we can do some question and answer regularly throughout the afternoon. So as I mentioned, we are all experiencing now a global transition in energy systems. And this is motivated in large part by climate change, knowing, of course, that in order to keep the temperature rise of the globe to below 1.5 or even 2 degrees, we have to fully decarbonise our world economy by the middle of this century. And so this, of course, is driving a large degree of the energy change that we are seeing in the world. But there are also other good reasons why we might want to change our energy systems. And these relate to energy and security, to ensure that we always have a dependable supply of energy, to energy access, because there are over 1 billion people in the world who do not, for example, have access to electricity. So we might need to change our energy systems, for example, towards renewable microgrids to enable them to access energy. And then finally, energy underpins all aspects of the global economy. And having advanced and more reliable and cheaper forms of energy enables us to improve the productivity of our economies. So for all these reasons, we are motivated to look at changing our energy systems, but particularly because of climate change. And let me give you the bottom line at the very beginning of this presentation. So the take-home message is that there will be a massive transformation take place in the world's energy supply in the coming decades. And this will affect absolutely everything, and in particular, our energy and our energy security. So let's go back into history and just look at where the energy transition we're experiencing now sits in the scheme of things. And we go back to the Industrial Revolution in this graph, which you can see shows the amount of energy that the world has used in successive years since the Industrial Revolution and where that comes from. So you can see that back in around 1850, at the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution, it was mainly biomass that provided the energy source for the world. And of course, it has continued to do so. And interestingly, more or less at the same level, even though the world economy and population has grown enormously since that time. And of course, the Industrial Revolution was founded on the introduction of coal. This is the black part of the graph. And later, when we invented the internal combustion engine, on the energy sources from oil, and then, of course, from natural gas. We, in parallel, harnessed our river systems to generate hydropower. That's the light blue here. And more recently, since the 1960s, we have harnessed the power of nuclear fission. That's conventional nuclear power, the yellow line that we can see in the graph here. So all these contribute to the energy mix at present. And those of you who have very good eyesight can see that on the top of this graph lies a very, very thin purple line. And this is the sum total of all other renewable energy that exists up until the present. And it is a very small contributor. However, I will state at the beginning that other renewables, that is mainly solar and wind, will soon replace all carbon-based energy systems. And indeed, they need to do so in the next decade or two in order for us to reach our global climate change targets. So this will be a massive transformation. Everything you can see on this graph that uses carbon-based forms of energy will soon be transformed to renewables. So this will be a change that is comparable in scope and magnitude to the Industrial Revolution at the beginning of this graph. So let's now compare us in terms of the energy transition that we're undergoing at the moment to the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution was by and large driven by technology. It was by and large unplanned and unforeseen. These developments happened without people really having any previous knowledge of the new changes. As a result, there was huge social and economic dislocation, and governments played very little role in this, and the end result was largely chaotic. Let's contrast this then with what we might expect for the energy transition. It's similar in scope and magnitude to the Industrial Revolution, but it's driven mainly by climate change. Of course, it's facilitated by possibly even fortuitous advances in technology, which happen to have occurred at exactly the right time in history to allow us to mitigate the effects of our changing climate. And in this sense, it's completely foreseeable and it can be planned because we do understand what needs to be done, and we do avoid social and economic dislocation in the energy transition. And for this reason, government has a key role in the planning process to make this happen in a smooth, efficient, and economically effective way. So the energy transition doesn't have to resemble the Industrial Revolution. We know that it's coming, and we have the ability and the tools to deal with it. Indeed, the energy transition is happening as we speak. This graph shows the new energy capacity additions in gigawatts per year for a range of different energy generation technologies. And we can see that solar PV, photovoltaics, and wind are already the dominant forms of new energy generation additions in the global energy system. Gas is more or less constant. Coal seems to be declining. Hydro is constant, if not declining. Nuclear has bubbled along at the bottom a bit, along with bio and a few other smaller forms of generation. But it is really this ramping up of solar and wind that is changing the energy systems as we speak, and it's the either the constant or the declining role for fossil fuels that will be a feature for the energy transition in years to come. In this global context, Australia has an important role to play. And the reason for that is shown in this graph, where we see the amount of installed renewable energy capacity per person in each year by different regions of the world. And what we see here is that per capita, Australia is now leading the world in the installation of renewable energy capacity. So the current installation rate in Australia exceeds 250 watts of renewable energy capacity per person per year. This is 10 times the world average, and it's much greater than many other countries, which are shown here in this graph. So Australia, in some sense then, because of this change in the rate per person, is really at the leading edge of the energy transition. We are installing more renewable energy per person than any other country. And so we are learning very early on the lessons of the energy transition. So it's worth understanding what's happening in Australia so that other countries can benefit from this learning process. The other thing that's important to understand is that the energy growth will shift to the Asia-Pacific region. Here we have a graph from the International Energy Agency predicting where the primary energy demand centres will be in 2035. And we can see that the Asia-Pacific region will dominate the energy demand in the world. In fact, if you look at the growth in energy demand, as shown in this pie chart, you'll see that the non-OECD part of the Asia Pacific will contribute around 2/3 of the growth in energy demand in the period leading up to 2035. So this is very important because it means that this part of the world will be crucial to the energy transition and indeed to achieving the world's climate goals. And Australia is indeed part of the region and provides a lot of energy currently into the Asia Pacific. So at ANU, we have embarked on what we call a grand challenge, and it's titled Zero Carbon Energy for the Asia Pacific. And what we're trying to do here is to understand the key research drivers for transitioning the energy use of the Asia Pacific region towards renewable energy into the future. And the starting point for this is to understand the present, and in particular Australia's role in this process. So here I've got a diagram which shows the major export commodities for Australia, which are in energy and in minerals. There's another major export commodity, which is education. We educate a lot of international students in this country, and its value is typically in the top 3 or 4 export earners in Australia each year. But what I show here are the important ones for energy. So we have, for example, thermal coal, which is exported to mainly the Asia Pacific region, and it contributes to emissions in the region as well, of course. More than 500 million tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent each year, in fact. We also export liquid natural gas, LNG, which contributes more than 200 million tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent each year by use in energy and industrial processes in the Asia Pacific. So those are the energy exports that contribute to Asia Pacific's emissions from Australia. We also export a lot of minerals, in particular iron ore and aluminium ore, and these contribute more than 1,000 million tonnes of CO2 when they're converted, often using metallurgical coal from Australia, into iron and steel, and similarly more than 200 million tonnes of CO2 when aluminium ores are converted into aluminium. As a result, 96% of these emissions occur from Australian exports in the Asia Pacific region, and indeed contribute to 8.6% of the Asia Pacic's total greenhouse gas emissions. So these are very important consequential emissions arising from Australia's exports to the region. And in fact, if we total all these up, this amounts to nearly 2,000 million tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent per year in the Asia Pacific, which is 3.7 times Australia's own emissions. So we are a major contributor from Australia, if you like, to emissions in the Asia Pacific. Now, we all know that in order to reach our global climate targets by 2050, that we need to change this. And so our grand challenge is looking at how this might happen and ways in which renewable energy can play a role in a new trading relationship between Australia and the Asia Pacific. And we published this very recently. It is about to appear in the journal Energy. So a future Australian export scenario might look something like this. Here we make 2 assumptions. The first assumption is that Australia exports the same amount of energy as it does now in joules. And we, in this scenario, assume that 80% of this energy is exported as hydrogen, which is shown by the big green arrow here, and 20% as renewable electricity, the smaller green arrow here, using high voltage direct current undersea cables to link Australia with Southeast Asia and potentially beyond. So in other words, all we're saying is that we're exporting the same amount of energy as we do now in thermal coal and liquid natural gas, except in the future, this will be done 80% as hydrogen and 20% as renewable electricity. The second assumption that we make is that Australia will mine the same amount of mineral ores, but export this as manufactured processed metals. 510 million tonnes as green steel using renewable electricity and hydrogen, and 18 million tonnes as green aluminium using renewable electricity to undertake this process. And so what you see then over here are the future export scenarios where we simply export the same amount of energy from Australia as we do now and use the same amount of minerals as we do now, but export that as green metals. If we add up the total amount of renewable energy required to do this, what we find is that this amounts to 7,000 terawatt hours per year. This is a really big number. To put it into context, this is 27 times Australia's current electricity generation. And indeed, if you remember that Australia has to, first of all, turn its own domestic renewable energy into 100% electricity from renewable energy by the middle of the century anyway, plus it has to electrify the rest of its economy. That's another 200% renewable energy. If you add this to the 27 times for export, then you end up with a number which is effectively 3,000% renewables. Or in other words, we have to build an electricity system 30 times as big as it is now and run it all from renewable energy. Now, of course, these are really big numbers, and indeed it would take the land area shown in this blue square in order to do this with 50% solar and 50% wind. This, by the way, is roughly 2% of Australia's land area, or a bit more of the land area used, for example, to harvest forests for timber. So let's say only 10% of this is true. This still means that we have to double Australia's zero emissions electricity future domestically, which is, as we say, requiring 300% renewables. That would have to become 600% if only 10% of the exports that we talk about here of renewable energy and green metals are actually realised. So this is a huge shift and indeed one that we undertake research on across a whole range of topics in order to understand what is needed to achieve this. And again, it's only to satisfy current energy demands and current demands for mineral ores. Okay, so now we might have a question break. If you would like to ask a question, then please use the raise hand facility. And then when you've finished, use lower hand to remove it. And I'll look for questions now and stop sharing for a moment. So while we're waiting people to put up their hands, I've got a question in the chat, which says, your graph of CO2 exports for iron ore, aluminium, etc., is very intriguing and very high numbers. Absolutely they are, because in order to process the mineral ores requires an enormous amount of energy. And currently this is being provided by fossil fuels, either through the metallurgical coal in blast furnaces for iron ore and steel, or through fossil fuel generation of electricity for aluminium smelting. So these are big numbers, but they are the true numbers. And so it is important to reduce these numbers in order to reach our global emissions objectives by the middle of the century. I see we have a question from Christian Tanto.
Okay, thank you, Professor Bartlett. Okay, my name is Cristianto, and thank you for this great opportunity from ANU. Currently, I work for the Ministry of Trade of Indonesia, so this issue is quite the hot topics right now in terms of trade negotiations with our trading partners.
Yes.
When I see your chart there, I would like first to congratulate Australia for the big achievement to be the leaders of renewable energy in the world. But there's some questions there. If you, for example, for industrial usages, how can we provide a stable energy, a renewable energy for energy intensified industries such as steels and iron forgery and something like that. Because here in Indonesia, if we want to switch and transition from like say a coal-based furnace technology into the renewable energy furnace, that will be a great investment, a big investment for our current industry, and that will be, I don't know, economically challenge for our current industry right now. The second is when you say that your main three energy resources right now is from solar and wind, and you already said that it will take a big land transitions. Perhaps you will consume more and transition from like, I don't know, a big land of that was used for agriculture, and then you switch it to like wind farm or solar farm like that. But then how you address the social problem? Because in Indonesia, agriculture is still our main and sensitive issues for our government. So if you transition that will be a big problem. So
I agree with you, and indeed we've got a special session later in the course.
Okay.
I
mean that's just my 2 cents.
Yes, no, I think you're absolutely right. So we'll talk about that in one of the later sessions. But just briefly, in Australia, we have the benefit of the fact, well, I don't know if you think of it as a benefit, but most of our country is desert. It's land that's not used for agricultural production. And so there is great opportunity for siting solar and wind farms in these relatively underpopulated areas. Bearing in mind, though, that often these areas are owned by the Indigenous peoples of Australia. And so we have part of our project which looks at the Indigenous engagement opportunities for these communities to be co-investors, if you like, in these massive new renewable energy farms. So that's one thing that we're thinking of. But you're absolutely right. In countries where land is very highly utilised, these opportunities aren't so great. But Australia is in a good position to be an exporter of energy for exactly that reason. Going back to your first question about converting current iron and steel production facilities into facilities that use renewable energy. This is a huge transition process involving billions and billions of dollars of new investment in facilities that use renewable electricity to generate heat and that use hydrogen to reduce the iron ore, the iron oxide. So you've got to remove the oxygen from the iron.